Hi there, Lincoln owners. Today in your 2019 Lincoln Nautilus, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Roadmaster's InvisiBrake supplemental braking system. And this is what our braking system looks like when it's installed. The majority of the main components are going to be inside the vehicle, located underneath the driver's seat. This is the main box that, when received a signal from the motorhome through the lighting circuits, it will then proportionally apply the brakes in the vehicle. You can adjust your pressure using the knob here, and that really just comes down to test. You'll have to adjust that based on the vehicle you're hauling, which we know we got a Nautilus here, but it's also affected by the motorhome that we're pulling it. The larger the motorhome will likely need less pressure, but the smaller our motorhome will likely need more pressure. Our cylinder is also mounted down here right next to it, and this is what actually attaches to the pedal up on the front to pull it and apply it when we hit our brakes in the motorhome. Here you can see the cable that comes from our cylinder attached to the pedal. It clamps around the pedal, and there's a pulley that's attached to the floor or firewall. So when the cylinder pulls it, it uses that pulley to get a mechanical advantage, which gives it plenty of power to apply the brakes. And the unit is attached into our vacuum brake booster system, so we also get power assist, so we've got plenty of stopping power here. They call it the InvisiBrake as well because all the components here are smaller than what a lot of the other systems are, such as Demco's Air Force One or Blue Ox's Patriot. We've got a real small footprint here at the front that shouldn't really affect your daily driving when you're not using this in a flat tow scenario. There's 5 main components you'll need when flat towing your vehicle behind your motorhome. You'll need your tow bar, which is the connection between your motorhome and your vehicle. You'll need your safety cables, which is a supplemental connection in addition to your tow bar. You'll also need your base plate, which is your connection point for your tow bar on your vehicle. You'll need your diode wiring, which will take all the lighting signals from your motorhome and send them to the lights at the back of your vehicle. And lastly, you'll need your supplemental braking system, which will apply the brakes in your vehicle when you hit the brakes in your motorhome to help you come to a safe stop. Now, a couple additional components you're going to want for your Nautilus here in order to complete your flat tow setup is a battery disconnect. You can get that from Roadmaster here at eTrailer, and then it's important for when setting up your braking system and making the whole thing work, being able to put it into flat tow. And you'll also need a stoplight switch, which is also important for your braking system, making all those components work together. You can get that from Roadmaster here as well. And you can see here that when we pull the breakaway switch here at the front, it will activate the pedal on the inside. And this is our supplemental connection here. So in the event we had a catastrophic disconnect, the cable here that's attached to the motorhome would pull the pin. This also comes included with your kit, and in most cases can attach to your base plate. I'm going to go ahead and pull this now, and you'll see in the inside our pedal activate. So now we're going to go ahead and hit the brakes in the motorhome, and when the brakes are pressed here, the pedal will apply here at the back. And then when we let off the brakes will release here on the inside. The InvisiBrake system is a hidden braking system in comparison with others. It does have a little bit more on the install side, but it is a very good functioning system that gives you a lot of versatility, so you can use it with just about any vehicle. One of the ones that I would consider over the InvisiBrake though would be Demco's Stay and Play Duo. If you have hydraulic brakes on your motorhome, that's my top pick braking system. And if you have air brakes on your motorhome, then I would recommend Demco's Air Force One. They're going to be truly proportional systems that are going to have a monitor light and a lot of the same features of our InvisiBrake, but I find the installation to be a little bit easier, and I just find that the system works just a little bit better. It's a little easier to dial in. Now that we've covered some of the features of our braking system, why don't you follow along with me and I'll show you how to get it installed. We'll begin our installation by first planning out where we're going to put all of our components. We also want to keep in mind that in order for an InvisiBrake to work on a Nautilus, there is some extra components you're going to need to work. And that's pretty much any braking system. Our Nautilus here does require a lot of extra components due to the way it's designed. A couple of the things you're going to need in addition to your InvisiBrake is a battery disconnect, which you can get from Roadmaster. We also need a stoplight switch, which you can also get from Roadmaster. And you need to have diode wiring installed on your vehicle as well. So we're going to go ahead and get our major components mounted up first, and we're actually going to start on the inside. Now, we've installed our main unit behind the driver's seat underneath the seat here. And you can see our box right here. There's actually a plastic cover that goes over top of a factory module just underneath it here. You can see we can kind of lift this up because we actually just use some hook and loop fasteners to attach this. You can get hook and loop fasteners at your local craft store, and that'll work out really well for getting this module mounted. Now, in order to get this box to fit under here, we did have to move one of our electrical connectors. The crossbeam here that's plastic has an electrical connector that's located on the bottom of it. We pulled that connector off and we just tucked it on top of the beam and then used a zip tie to secure it on top of the beam. I do recommend that you also raise and lower your seat up and down and move it back and forward to make sure that you're not going to put it in a position where that's going to damage the wiring. If you kind of look and see how we've got it here, that's in a way where it can still move in all of its positions and it's not going to affect its operation. Next to the control box here, we've mounted the actuating cylinder, and to mount this we actually just sat it right here on the carpet next to it, and we cut a little slit in the carpet on each side of the cylinder, and then we just ran a zip tie around it and secured it right to the carpet, and that'll hold it right in place for us. So now we need to route all of our wiring, and that cylinder we mounted underneath the seat actually has a pulley that we need to mount and connect to the brake pedal here at the front. In order to get all that stuff up there, we want to route it underneath the carpet. So to get underneath the carpet, there's a trim piece right here. You just simply pull that up. It just pulls right out of there. And then there is a trim piece right here. That's this one here. This one here also just pulls off, but you will need to remove the lever here for your hood release first. To release the lever, if you look here, you can see that there's a tab right there. There's a tab just like that on the opposite side as well. You'll just take a small pick and you'll poke it in there and push in on that tab on each side and then pull outward on the handle to release it. Once you've done that, then this panel just pulls off. It's just clipped in as well, but that handle will hold it on. Now, this box, this piece here is also where we mounted part of our components for our battery disconnect. That's our switch right there that'll disconnect our battery. But we needed to get all this stuff out of the way so we can get all of our stuff routed. So you can see our cylinder here that we mounted under the seat has a black cable that comes out of it. And it's routed underneath the carpet. It kind of runs down the side. We want to make gentle curves with it as we go on towards our pedal. Our pulley there needs to mount directly behind where we clamp it on the pedal. This is our pedal clamp right here. You'll have two pieces. One's going to have a 90-degree on it. That's where the end of the cable will go that's coming from that cylinder. It just slides in. There's two nuts here you just tighten down, and those are your adjustments. So you can make some subtle adjustments on the tension there if you need to. I did cut off the excess here because you get a lot more pedal bracket than what you need. They do that because various vehicles have different thicknesses for their pedal shaft here. So just cut off any excess. And you'll notice there at the back where we had to mount this. Unfortunately on the Nautilus, there's just no good mounting location for the cylinder there because the firewall doesn't have any meat to it right there. There's just foam in that location. So we did have to make our own bracket to allow us to put that wheel there in line with our pedal. We just used the included self-tapping screws to attach it to the plate once we got the plate mounted. The plate we mounted just using self-tapping screws. Now we made our own plate here in-house, but we do have plates that are specifically designed for the InvisiBrake system here. It's going to have all the mounting holes and everything already there for you, so everything will line right up, and it's going to be a larger plate. So here we can see the back side of our module. We're looking at this on the driver's side underneath the front of the seat. And you can see here there's already a pre-existing flap that's here where there's wires routed for an existing module underneath our module. So that's a perfect opportunity for us to feed our wires through to get them routed up. That's how we got them routed towards that pedal there for the cable and all that. But you'll see we've also got several wires and stuff here we need to plug in. You're going to have a harness that has 4 wires on it. And it'll have a yellow, green, brown, and white. We're going to plug that connector in on the far side here on the corner and be on the right, or how we're looking at it right now. Next to that, we're going to have another connector. It's got 4 wires on it. 2 of those are going to be for the breakaway switch. They're going to go to a plug on one end. And the other 2 are going to be a red and a black wire, and that's our power and our ground for our system. If we continue on, you're going to see we now have a couple of hose ports. One of these has a rubber hose that we poke on it first, and then we can poke in the 1/4-inch air line that comes in our kit. And we're going to route this outside to connect to the vacuum line from our brake booster, and that way it's going to ensure that it's pulling vacuum on the system, so we've got power assist when the system activates. And the last port on there is a quick connect, which is for the airline tubing that's going to connect the unit to the cylinder here. So you can see we just cut a small piece and we ran it over, and it's a quick connect, so you just poke it in on each end. You don't really have to do anything, just push that guy in there. I like to give it a little tug just to make sure it doesn't come out. And you can see here the other end goes towards our cylinder, and it just pokes into the quick connect there as well. So all those components that we just plugged into the unit, they route underneath the carpet, and they're going to come out and go to a grommet located over here. This is kind of just in front of where the brake pedal is. So just pull up that grommet, and then you can feed all of our wires and hoses and everything else down through there. And from there, we're going to route those up to the engine compartment. Now before we go outside though and route those up, we have another component we need to install in order to make our system work properly with our Nautilus. Because the battery is going to be disconnected when we're flat towing, so that means our stoplight switch on our vehicle is not going to work. So we're going to have to add our own stoplight switch that we can power up while the vehicle's in flat tow mode. So that's this guy here. You can get this from Roadmaster. There's a bracket here that you see. If you follow the shaft back, it attaches to a pre-existing bolt where your brake booster actually pushes through and attaches. So we'll just take that nut off, attach the bracket to it, and then we can attach the switch itself to the bracket. And then you'll want to adjust the nuts on the switch until the plunger's pushed in, and then if you push on the brake pedal, the plunger should extend. You can kind of see that there. So that's how we want to adjust it. Before putting your switch up here and adjusting it, I highly recommend taking the wires that come with the stoplight switch and extending those, because this is in a really hard spot to get to. So go ahead and attach the red wire that comes in the kit to one, attach the green wire that comes in the kit to the other one, and you can just let those hang down. We're going to be connecting one of those to a power source, and the other one is going to connect to the indicator light that's going to activate inside the motorhome. So we've got those connected. If we look straight down, we'll see before we pass our wires through to go outside, the red wire that we had routed down, we actually attached using a quick splice to the red wire coming off of our main unit, because that's going to be the power wire for the unit, so that way it'll also power the stoplight switch. The green wire that we came in our kit that attached to our stoplight switch will attach to a black wire that comes in our kit. That's going to be our stoplight wire that we have to route up to the front of the vehicle so we can connect it to our motorhome. Another thing to keep in mind is this wire here is for our battery disconnect. We kind of mentioned that before. This wire actually starts on the outside and needs to get routed in through the same location that we're routing these wires out. So while you're routing these wires up to the engine compartment, go ahead and drop this guy down and route this one in, because we're going to need to make connections in here. The airline tubing that comes in your kit makes a great fish wire to help you route all these wires to where they need to go. So here you can see underneath where all of our wires come out. We're kind of just behind a cross beam right here, and then this is the subframe where the engine is, just in front of this cross beam. So this is then just going to go up. Here's our firewall. We just kind of follow these factory lines here going up, because that way we know we're avoiding any moving and excessively hot components. All of our wires and our hoses and everything are going to come up right here. So the harness that had the green, the yellow, the brown, and the white, those need to tap into your existing diode wiring, which is what you'll see right here. These three wires are our diode wires that are going towards the front. All we did is we took the diode wires that are running from the front of the vehicle to the back, we cut those in half, and we add the wires from our braking system into them. So you can see it's a single wire on one side, one of these wires goes back to the lights, and then the other wire here is the one from our braking system. We just go color to color to match those together. The white wire is our ground wire. You could go to the ground from your diodes, or you could just run it over to a ground stud. I chose to go to a ground stud because there's one right here on the other side of the battery, and I prefer to use a grounding stud whenever possible for my grounds. When connecting these, we did use heat shrink butt connectors. That's going to seal up our ends of our connection here to ensure we've got long-lasting corrosion-free connections. Next, we have our black and our red wire that we had routed from our module. The red wire is power and the black wire is ground. So the black wire routed over to that same ground stud where we had routed the white wire. You can see it here. I actually just kind of separated the two wires. They just pull apart. If you're having a difficult time pulling them apart, cut them right between the two of them, and then they usually pull apart much easier. The red wire runs over and it connects to the fuse harness that comes in our kit. So we just use another heat shrink butt connector to connect that there. And then this will attach to a ring terminal too. And then we attached it to the stud here on our battery. Now, this does get a little bit confusing here because you're looking at the battery, but this is actually, this connector here is the battery side of our disconnect switch. It needs to be on the always hot side of your disconnect switch. So we can see here, this is the cable from our disconnect switch here. It is labeled battery post, and it's attached to the actual battery post here. The one labeled battery cable is the other side of our disconnect, and that actually connects to the battery cable that used to be attached to the battery, but I cut the battery cable right off of the attachment here. I just cut it right there at the end, and then I just bolted it to the cable here. I just drilled a hole in the end that I cut off and then bolted them together, and then used some heat shrink to shrink it down. The hardware will come with your battery disconnect for connecting all of these together, and so did the heat shrink and all that. So once you've got those connected, it is very important that we're connecting to the battery side and not the other side. You could also connect over here on the battery disconnect switch. Just make sure that you're connecting to the battery post side, the one that's labeled battery post, which would be this side, and not the battery cable side, which is this side, because this side's going to be dead when you're in flat tow. Next, you'll have your breakaway switch wire, and that has a connector on the end, and it's in a black sheathing. We continue routing that around our box here. We kind of go across this way, and then it goes back behind the taillight here, where we then head down and over to our breakaway switch located over on the passenger side. You can see that over here. We've got plenty of extra wire here, so we just bundled it all up and zip tied it, because you get a whole bunch of length. And it just plugs in. Here's our connector here, where the two ends just plug together. So now we need to move on to our battery disconnect switch. We talked about the two main cables and how we got those attached and where we need to make sure we're hooking our braking system up. But we still need to be able to activate this and turn it on and off. So there's a couple extra wires on here, and we also need to get it mounted. We use the ground stud for one of the ears here. Just pulled the ground stud out and slid it over. You can see that they're open on the ends. We could just slide it behind it and then run it back down. The other side here, we used a self-tapping screw and just ran it in there. You want to make sure you're using a short one, because we don't want it to contact our coil spring behind it. Now that you've got it mounted, you've got two studs here. The white wire is the ground for activating the switch. We just looped that right around to the ground stud and attached it right onto there. This one here is for our activation for our switch, and this is that gray wire that we had routed inside. So while we were routing our wires out, we used our airline tubing as a pull wire, just taped this wire to it, and we kind of just pulled part of it back up in there, so that way we were able to get this wire easily routed inside. Once we get it routed inside, we need to connect it to the switch that comes included with it. So there's our switch. When we press it, it'll turn the car on and off, and when we look at the back side, I just put some tape over it just to protect those. You'll have just two screws. Loosen up those screws, and then here's the wire that we routed in. You'll have to strip back some of the gray sheathing to reveal a red and a black wire. Strip back each of those wires, the red and the black, poke those in, and then just tighten the screws down. One wire per screw. Doesn't matter which one's which. They're not, there's no polarity or anything you have to worry about on that. And then if you want to, you can just put some tape on it. That's just in case, just we don't want to prevent any shorts, because this is kind of a tight area. For our button here, you'll also have to drill out a hole for it to pass through. I just used a stepper bit, and I just drill it out, and then I just kind of periodically test the fit, because I want to have a nice tight fit in there. We don't want this coming out. There is a nut on the back side, but it can be difficult to get that tightened down pretty tight, so that's why I like to have a nice fit with the hole that I drill using a step bit to help give us an extra layer of security, keeping that button in there. So the vacuum line that we routed from inside, that we had connected the airline tubing, it routes out, and we need to connect into our existing vacuum line from our booster. And that's what this is coming here, the braided line, as well as up here. So we cut out a section of the line here. I did pull the engine cover off. There's a single bolt you have to take out, or two bolts, I'm sorry, right here. Let's remove those, and then this cover just lifts off of there. So we got that out of the way to give us more room to work with. We cut out a section. We did use tubing cutters to do so. I highly recommend using tubing cutters, because these plastic lines and stuff, they can crack, and you can get unclean cuts with them that may not seal properly. We then use some of the hose that comes in our kit. We poke a small portion on to the factory line. We put a check valve facing towards the engine with the black side, just the little arrow there facing towards the engine. A little bit more section of the line that comes in the kit. We then put our T in. You'll have two sides of the T that are a larger size, and then one side that is a smaller size. The smaller side is going to connect to our hose that we routed from inside out. You'll get a small section of rubber hose as well, and that's to connect the T to the airline tubing. The airline tubing just pushes in that smaller rubber tube you'll get in your kit. Same rubber tube that we used inside when we connected it to the unit. We then use another section of hose here to connect our T back to our factory line, and we just poke that right on there. So that completes our installation here on the vehicle side. We're going to go ahead and get our carpet and everything reinstalled on this side, and then we're going to head over to our motorhome to get the monitor light and audio board mounted up. Now inside of our motorhome we need to mount up our indicator. You'll get a sticker in your kit, you'll just put that on there, and then we use a 5/16 drill bit to drill out the hole for our indicator light. That'll just push on through. You'll have two wires, a red and a white. You'll also have an audio board that comes with your unit. We're going to wire that into the same wires, so we took both the red from the light and the audio board. We can crimp those together, and then we crimp the white together on a different butt connector. Our red wire attaches to the long black wire that comes in our kit, and we route this to the back of the vehicle, so the back of our motorhome, so when we plug our vehicle in, it'll send the brake signal that we attached to the stoplight switch in our vehicle up here. The white wires are just ground, so we just use a small section of black wire here that runs down, and we grounded it with a self-tapping screw by putting a ring terminal on it right down there. And you can see here that when I press the brakes apply in the vehicle and it turns on our indicator. When I let off the brakes, the light goes out. You can see the black wire here that we had run from our monitor light to the back here connects to the blue wire on our 7-way. That is the brake output if you were hauling a trailer, but our customer here doesn't have a brake controller and he doesn't intend on hauling a trailer on his vehicle. So this way, instead of having an additional connector you got to plug in for this monitor light, he can just plug in his 7-way to his vehicle and it'll send the signal right through that wire. We made this connection using a heat shrink butt connector. We'll use our heat gun to shrink these down. And that completes our installation of Roadmaster's InvisiBrake supplemental braking system on our 2019 Lincoln Nautilus.